TESOL Pop, Season 11, Episode 4. Hello and welcome to TESOL Pop, the mini podcast for busy teachers. I'm your host, Laura Wilkes, and joining me today to talk about digital equity and literacy is Jacqueline Aguilera. Jacqueline's work at the Mayor's Office for Adult Literacy in Texas means that she sees a whole range of needs when it comes to access to hardware, the infrastructure, learners' needs, as well as teacher training needs. What's really inspiring about today's conversation is how we circle back to the question of what is it that our learners actually need, and how can we make use of the resources that we currently have. Let's join the conversation where Jacqueline describes the challenges and trends that she's noticing right now when it comes to digital equity and literacy.
One of the big things is integration. We used to really concentrate very well on our subject matter. So if I was teaching, ESL or adult basic education or, GED, civics, whatever the subject matter was, I was a subject matter expert in that particular siloed topic. And one of the things that we're seeing now is silo busting, that we are breaking out of our individual topics, our subject matter expertise, and actually contextualizing it with technology. One of the things that I've been helping instructors understand, and I had this conversation just a couple of days ago, is this does not mean that you have to have separate computer classes anymore. The fact that you can integrate text messaging, you speak about using a smartphone. You talk about the QR codes that are everywhere now. The different things that we need to know in order to participate in this digitally driven world that has now pretty much become a part of daily living is digital literacy. So it sounds a little daunting. It sounds like, oh, one more thing to do, but it really isn't. And one of the keys is to assess your learners, your students, about the technology that they are encountering every day, and use that as a catalyst to integrate digital literacy, those conversations, integrate everyday skills into whatever subject matter you're teaching an adult ed.
I love that fact that you describe this as a silo busting kind of scenario that we're in at the moment. As Neja was describing that, it really is significant, isn't it, what we're facing at the moment? The rate of change and digitalization of our lives as a whole. It has always been there, right, in terms of like the internet and things like that, but it's happening a lot faster. In terms of your context of Austin, Texas, what are you seeing on a ground level in terms of what this looks like? And I realize it may look different from school or college setting to college. Could you give us a taste of what's happening on the ground?
Of course. Texas is a big state. Well, you look at Texas, United States, Texas. So Texas as a state is huge. And one of the challenges here is that vastness. A lot of it is rural. A lot of it is still considered country, farm, agriculture. So when we're looking at digital equity and access, and then the knowledge, what we know, of course, you have to have the equitable access. Not all internet is created equally. We know this. And just to say that you have connectivity is not enough. Many times when we are trying to conduct classes, conduct business, we're trying to speak with each other. Look at the pandemic itself when we were all locked away. And the only means of communication was relying on that technology. But the quality of that technology. Others, again, we're looking at the gap, the divide. Others, some people had great connectivity, a very high level, high quality internet access. So their streaming, their experience was glorious. I mean, it was fantastic, and it continues to be so today. But those who do not have that type of access, that quality access, even when the infrastructure is put in, it is still difficult to participate in the technology evolution, the skills development, because you still have, for lack of better words, primitive tools. And so here it is again, that's part of the challenge. The other challenge too, as mentioned, is the equipment itself. Again, not all laptops are created the same, not all smartphones are created the same, and all of the technology, so it's not just getting the technology, but then the type of technology. Then we add on to it the knowledge. So in our state, in Texas, it's so diverse, just on the basis of where you live in the state. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that if you live more in the suburbs or the inner cities that it's automatically better, because we have also seen, again, that's part of the digital equity, the gaps, the access. There are better quality services in some parts of the city than in other parts of the city. So, looking at this as an equity issue, as an access issue, is a common challenge. It is greater within the rural areas than it is within the cities, but it's still a challenge. And then let's look at when we finally get connected, we finally have the equipment, and now it's time to learn how to use it. And, again, reflecting back on the lessons from the pandemic, schools sent loads of laptops and we got hotspots. We got funding to purchase all these things, sent it to people's homes and said, now you're ready to help your children. Now you're ready to go to work. Everything is fine. It's just go back to things as the new norm. And everyone is going, okay, what do I do with this? How do I converse? How do I attach? How do I log in? And now, so many different challenges. And here, with what we're looking at with our adult education, is not only basics, which, that is the foundation, the basics of digital literacy, but then what is the next step? What comes beyond? As most of our dedication, to our learners, whether they're, refugees, second language learners, or they're learners that have had stop outs in their lives and they're, studying for alternative certifications. They're all needing that type of instruction and knowledge from knowledgeable instructors. That has been the challenge too, because here it is again, instructors need more than the basics. And in order for them to help the learners be competitive, be able to adjust not only for themselves, but for their children, their families that are growing up in this massively quickly evolving industry that's driven by technology, they have to have higher level technology experiences. And where does that take us again? To budgets and funding.
It's really complex, isn't it, what you described, like in terms of the infrastructure, the knowledge, the access to hardware, and also the ongoing training that teachers need in order to be able to create these learning opportunities to bring this equity, digital equity, and make these impacts to their community with the funding as well, of course. And as you're describing that, I can imagine so many listeners can relate to this gap that you describe, where maybe there's not that infrastructure in place, or maybe certain students don't have access to that certain hardware in their own home. And I know you work across the state and you see examples of teachers being really creative in finding ways to work around those gaps so that students aren't left behind and that we can access these skills. Could you give some examples of best practices that you're seeing that are really navigating this complex landscape?
Sure. Again, looking at some of the basics, if you at least have a smartphone or a phone, you have a keyboard. One of the things that is wonderful is looking at that keyboard. Number one, when I used to, work with our second language learners and also our low literacy learners, a lot of times it was that basic breakdown of words and spellings and identifying the letters. The great part of a keyboard is it's not in alphabetical order. So you really have to learn the keys. You really have to learn them. And it was so much excitement when a student could actually type out a word or type out their name or they got a sentence together. And it was like, wow. And really knowing that there was learning there. It wasn't just memorization of symbols, that they was starting to get some understanding. Now, putting that into some basics for text messaging is one of the easiest ways to start getting that integration on digital literacy. You can start with paper and pen, the basics, or on a whiteboard or a chalkboard or whatever you have available to you. Start with our basic technology tools, those pens and paper, and then use that to put together a text message. Use that to start communicating with each other. There's so much that you can teach and correspond with and connect that doesn't involve a lot of high tech investment, but it is around us. I mean, even just a study of symbols to look at and start translating. When we see that QR code, when we see that block with a bunch of little dots, what does that mean? What can that do? One of my colleagues, Dr. Glenda Rose, made this real brilliant point, and it's one of those, oh wow, it's not so rocket science as they say, but it was just like an aha moment. She said, just talking about digital literacy is digital literacy because you are getting a conversation. You're introducing those concepts that are opening the doors to the practical use of digital literacy, of technology, of actually getting those hands on.
I love that you kind of just break down there so many ways in which we can bring it into the classroom in a way that's also perhaps less cognitively overloading for students who may find this actual field of study a little bit intimidating. I can imagine there's some students who'd be a lot more comfortable kind of talking about the topic first before you start bringing in any examples of devices, or even going on a field trip. That can build up their confidence so much to kind of layer it up rather than going to a lab, for example, and saying, okay, this is our first class together. Yep. Okay. This is your first time working from a computer and going on the internet. Yeah, let's just get into it. That can be a real barrier for folk who, I'm thinking particularly of my senior learners that I've worked with before in the past. Like we had to go things, go from the beginning. Like what is it exactly do they need? And how can we get to where they need to be?
And sometimes that literally this is the on button. Yeah, this is the off button. Because again, even looking at what we think is digital literacy, which is okay, you're gonna hop on, let's learn right away. Let's get you on the internet, let's email, let's this and that, and not even realizing that that is already like 5 steps ahead
Yeah.
of where your learners, your students are. And that's a big piece is you definitely have to find out where are your students at? What is part of their daily living? What is their experience? What is their impression of this vast, quick changing evolution of a world that is expecting you, is assuming that you understand that you can just jump on something and you know how to work it, to understand it, to apply it. It's really understanding your learners and the teachers understanding themselves and being okay with it. One of the big things with teachers, and it was a lesson that I had to learn in my experiences, is I'm not supposed to be Professor Know It All. I'm not the all knowing Oz, and in that, yeah, it's a little show. Behind it is person that's learning how to do all the mechanics and put on the show. But we're learning too, and that's okay. So if you ask your students to bring in examples of where they see technology, if they have those phones, they have the ability to have a camera, let them take pictures of their world, of their everyday experiences, the things that they see. That's digital literacy. And then to be able to communicate, to learn the language of expressing what they took a picture of, why that was meaningful, where was the technology, where did they see that, how can we learn about that? And then, of course, this becomes a really great experience for the learner because they develop their own picture dictionary, something that is so meaningful to them and vocabulary and the digital literacy. Everything becomes a part of the experience. And that's what I was referring to with silo busting, with us getting out of this idea that I teach X, but I have digital literacy, so I have to have X and a separate digital literacy. No, you contextualize it. You just put it into the experience.
I think it's just so good to go back to these foundations, Jacqueline, and thank you so much for sharing these today. It's given me so many ideas and kind of brought us back to that kind of foundations, like you say, of like, what is it that they need? What is the real world? Thinking about the interactions they're having on a daily life and removing those barriers so they can build confidence and, yeah, move in the direction they want to go in. I imagine you've come away from this conversation feeling as inspired as I have done. So I encourage you to go and check out the Mayor's Office for Adult Literacy, Houston, Texas, where Jacqueline and her team share updates about the important work they're doing. You can also follow Jacqueline on LinkedIn, where she shares updates and insights to what she's working on. As always, I've included those links in the show notes so you can find them easily. Finally, if you love the work we do here at ESOL Pop, which I know you do, then you can support us by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast to help more educators discover us. Also, don't forget to share this episode with your teaching community so you can continue the conversation about digital equity and literacy.